Have you noticed that out of all of the playoff teams, Reading have a much lower goal difference? They've scored as many goals as Wrexham, but they've conceded just two fewer than they've scored, meaning that they're on a goal difference of +2. I don't think, though, that those issues are defensive. I think that when we look at the player ratings and other things, we think that Bindon and Benge are generally doing pretty well. I think the issues are coming from further forward in the midfield, and we can see that against Blackpool. So let's take a look at two of these goals here. So first goal we're going to look at here is the first goal of the game. This was scored by Morgan. Right here you can see where Morgan is going to start in this play. The ball has just been played over the top by the goalkeeper after Chems chased him down. I don't hate how this is initially set up. You've got a back four here that is pretty compact with the two center backs ready to challenge for the ball, but also ready if these two kind of players behind, they're ready for knockdowns. Wing here is chasing, and we have all three of our center mids, although a little bit too much space for Savage between Savage and Wing here. Though usually I might expect that one of my eights goes, one of my eights stays. Morgan is going to kind of drift into the middle here, and I've sort of also noted Nibs coming back across. He was playing at left wing that day. The issue here, though, is this space that kind of opens and just doesn't really close for a very long time for Reading, right in the middle of their own half. So the ball's just come out of the sky. The number 9 here has actually done pretty well to take that ball down first time, and Benge's going across to react to that. And then you can see what you might think is the target Blackpool player here being tracked across by Wing. So right here, then, what I really want us to look at again is that central space in the middle, because a few seconds later, it's still there. It's gotten bigger. That space between Savage and Elliott now, your two eights in central midfield, has allowed the number 8 for Blackpool to walk straight through the middle. I think at this point, Nibs should be trying to hand off Morgan to Elliott here, trying to make sure that somebody's on him. And there should really be communication going on here. You can see a successful handoff in this exact same play when Wing actually hands off this player right here to Michael Craig as he goes around the corner, and Wing is then able to try to make a challenge on the ball. But unfortunately, it's a bit of a weak challenge, and that space between Elliott and Savage is just still there. You can still see this a couple seconds later, and they try to get back towards Morgan to recover, but he's got a lot of space. Look, this is League One. Sometimes a player is going to hit row Z from that particular position on the pitch quite a lot of the time. But they do also, you will also come across teams that have players who can put it in the bottom corner of your net from there. So for conceding that much space in the middle, that's an issue. And I think for this particular example, it was communication. But I do think there's something else going on as well with the defense. And the reason why I say it might be partially to do with the midfield. I think that especially against Blackpool, we saw the front 5 and the back 5 spread too far apart. So that back 5 for us is really going to handle building up in a 2-3 structure. And then that front 5, you're going to see the 2-8 push forwards and then try to create moves with the with the forward players. When it comes together, it almost looks like this WM formation here. So this is against Cambridge, a 3-0 win not very long ago. But against Blackpool, you can see it all just got a little bit more disjointed, and it got more stretched apart. Chem is really far down the field. I think the game state would affect this a little bit, but perhaps not this much. And really, the space in between here, the closest players, Nibs, who is meant to be the left winger, by the way, and Wing in the middle. I think that's an issue. Savage as well, really far forward on the field. And we can see that, I think, in the Apter goal. So Reading here in a situation like I was talking about, we've got this 2-3, and Benge's just stepped forward to play the ball to Craig. But then I just think that Elliott right here and Savage are too far apart from this line right now. We're sitting up against a 4-4-2 block, mid block from Blackpool, and this ball around the corner, it's a pretty long way to go if we want to play a ball along the ground that's going to be easier for our forward players to control. I would instead want Elliott to be closer here if we do want to play shorter passes. If we're going to play with the front 5 this far forward, then you would think that you would want to play the ball over the top, and that's not necessarily how this Reading team have set up to have success. So Craig here is kind of stuck down in the corner. There's, maybe he could go back to Wing here. That might be the obvious pass. He instead chooses to turn and loses the ball. It's maybe a foul. I'm not 100% sure that is, but here immediately we get kind of pulled apart from this. And you can see Savage and Elliott so far up the field and then having to come back. Now, Bindon is able to cover and get across to cover the player that gets the ball here. But we're lucky that he does, because you take a look at this. We've got 4 Reading players in an area where there are 6 Blackpool players. So this space between the front 5 and the back 5 has created an odd man rush for Blackpool, where they now have more players rushing towards our goal than we do. We've got Craig and Savage here recovering behind these particular Blackpool players. Bindon, though, does really, really well. He's able to shuffle that player across the field there. And when he does that, he arrives at the edge of the box just at the same time as the Blackpool player. But here's the issue. Those center mids recovering from so far forward on the field. You can see Savage here in full emergency defending mode. He's running back towards his own net. And again, maybe there are some communication things that could happen with what's about to happen here with this goal. But I think that when you're running back in emergency mode, all that communication is a lot harder. It's all happening very, very quickly on the field. That sort of emergency defending produces things like this, whereby if you are going to play teenage players, they may get sucked towards the ball as, this distance between Garcia and Apter, who's going to eventually score, opens up. The shot comes in and is actually saved pretty well by Pereira, but it's saved across the front of the box and then ends up with Apter. Garcia is just not nearly close enough to be able to get an effective block off on this. You can see that Savage is also trying to recover past, but this huge space opens up for Apter to get time to slot that ball home. Savage here hasn't stopped running at full pelt since Craig lost the ball here. So that tells you how far down the field they already were, right outside, of the Blackpool penalty box, and then had to come flying back. But this entire play, this entire goal happens before the number 8s can even get back for Reading. So look, I think that there are some communication issues at play here with Reading, and I do think that you are going to get those when you're playing a lot of very young players. But I also think that Reading, when they're playing in this 2-3 structure, it's built for short passing. It's built to find Ben Elliott in what Ruben used to call the red zone. I think that if we're going to play that kind of style under Noel, the same way that we did with Sellers, we need to have a compact structure, and that includes a vertical compact structure. So that's kind of why I think we conceded a few goals against Blackpool. The third one's a bit more of a loose one. These two in particular stood out to me as potential issues with Reading's defensive structure and defensive execution that I think are leading to them conceding more goals than the other playoff challengers.